Ian, welcome to Waterstones.
Thank you.
You've surprised us with the announcement and the arrival of this new novella, shall we call it, The Cockroach.
I surprised myself.
Okay.
I wasn't intending to write a quick book about this, but I've been on the road quite a while with Machines Like Me, my last novel before this one, and found myself at home with a week and thought, well, I really want to write about Brexit. It's too complex. I'll write a short story. And I just parodied the first sentence of Kafka's Metamorphosis. And that first paragraph, that just led to another. I then had to get back on the airplanes and do another bit of touring, and then I came back and found myself, I was still haunted by this short story. I had 3 weeks in August, and I just went on a roll. And it's one of these little things, and I had it with Nutshell, where a fetus is talking in the last 2 weeks of his life inside the womb, that you can have an outrageous, completely impossible first sentence. If you can persuade your reader across that line, and if you can persuade yourself across that line, you can then proceed in a realist style. So the cockroach is inhabiting the body of a prime minister, and but then from then on, it's a prime ministerial life. He's there to try and get through a project that's rather like Brexit. I mean, almost as stupid. No, probably less stupid, actually, when I come to think of it. Called reversalism, where you just reverse the money flow so that you have to pay for a job, and if you go shopping, you get lots of money for all the goods you're taking away. So here I am. I had no idea. If you told me in June that I'd be talking to you about a new book, I would have said you're completely nuts. There won't be another one for 3 years.
This sort of desire to write satire at a time like this. So we're recording this interview the day after the Supreme Court ruling up about prorogation. The House of Commons has just opened again. They're in there debating. And with everything happening here and across the pond with Trump, sometimes politics, when you turn on the news, can seem to be almost beyond satire because it's self-satirizing. Were you ever worried about dealing with the real news?
There were certain moments along the way when I thought the reality is beyond satire, just as you say. So, for example, I came to a point where I wanted to sum up my Cockroach Prime Minister's first statement to the House of Commons. So I looked in Hansard and looked at Boris Johnson's sort of mission statement. And I thought, I cannot better this, actually. So I simply sort of took it and then just fiddled around with the edges of it and condensed it a bit. We have now reached a point where Brexit as a project is a kind of religion. It has a mystical flavour. No one makes any economic arguments for it anymore. There are no economic arguments for it. There are no sovereignty arguments. I can't see a single argument for it except that it's gone into a kind of blood and soil mysticism. And I think the only reason we're leaving is because, as the German Chancellor says to Jim Sams, or as he says to the German Chancellor, and he runs out of reasons, we're leaving because we said we would, and because the people said they wanted it. That's it.
So with The Cockroach, obviously there's an entertainment in reading in the satire. Yeah. I wonder whether you hope that readers might also take something more serious away from it.
This novel really comes out of that point where despair meets laughter coming the other way. So that's what's important about it. It never occurred to me to really consider what benign effect would come of this. I just had to get this down, and I wanted a reader to have some fun along the way and some relief. I sometimes ask myself, is there a life for this book after Brexit? And I hope there is. And it's not a roman à clef. You can't identify any of the cockroaches against any of the ministers in cabinet. But I think it has a possible life as a warning when a political project gets so intense that people forget what the reason of it is, and begin to try and do things without reference to Parliament. And I think we've been just at that point. I celebrated with many others last night. To the enemies of the people, we raised our glass. When the Supreme Court gave its most scathing and illuminating judgment last night that the executive is the servant of the Parliament. And if you want to live in a free, open, democratic society, however inconvenient it is sometimes, and you can't get your project through by October the 31st, you've got to make that accommodation. Free, open, just societies are often slow-moving and inconvenient for your intense desires, but it's worth it.
Do you care to make any predictions about what might happen?
There is a forking path, to use Borges' phrase for it, that either he gets a deal or he doesn't. So that's one. Actually, that's one. If he doesn't, the next forking path is, does he obey the law? In that Parliament has said if you don't get a deal, then you've got to ask for an extension. Will he try and wriggle around that or not? And I think Parliament is quite right, now they're all back this afternoon, to say we're not going anywhere yet until we get an undertaking that you're going to obey the law. Now, I think frivolously, if Johnson does disobey the law, then he might have to go to prison. And let's not forget that before he got into all this, he was halfway through his book on Shakespeare. Now, if he could get a cell on his own, I would like him to finish that book. And I'd like you and he to be sitting here discussing it in a year's time.
Watch this space.